So yesterday we spoke a little bit about how lack of security, job security, can affect the breadwinner, the provider, where the questions and the answers to these questions are no longer really the same, where expectations now have shifted and a renegotiation really has to take place. Today though, we're going to be looking a little bit at, or rather discussing a little bit around who does this then affect? Who are the people or the situation structures that are going to be altered, and a new normal will have to be adopted? And I think the primary people or things that are going to be affected are family. It'll be the children, it'll be the wife, it'll be even extended families in situations where black tax is a thing. Whether you are a black individual or not, black tax still remains a practice or an exchange where money from your salary has to then be used to not only support you, but also extended family, even further extended family sometimes. So those are the individuals who it really impacts primarily. And the way that it will impact, as I touched on yesterday, where a question will be asked, but then the answer may be a little bit different. And this can also then create a lot of instability for the individuals, where we knew, number one, that for instance, ubaba, or your brother, whoever is the known breadwinner, your sister, your mother, whoever the breadwinner is no longer able to provide in a way that you have always known to be the norm. That change can end up making you feel as a child or a dependent, uncertain of what the future is going to present itself with. And so what that can also do is then also develop some level of anxiety in you as the person, where depending on how it is the provider responds to you based on what it is you say, or rather the request that you make and that they can't necessarily fulfill. As I said, it can be a very angry or frustrated response. You end up taking a back seat and end up questioning whether or not it's okay to ask in the future. If I'm approaching whoever the breadwinner is and I'm asking for a particular thing and they respond to me with anger, with frustration, the natural thing in the future will be, oh gosh, you end up thinking about what happened in the past and you fear having the same response, and so you avoid asking. And what then ends up doing, depending on how we deal with the situation, it can easily create a divide between the provider and the recipient, the dependent, because the roles have a little bit shifted, and our identity, our positioning within the family will no longer necessarily be the way it used to be. And so where there's a change within the provider's life and experiences and the manner in which they used to do things, it naturally ripples to the people around them. And we need to remember that in as much as the provider is going through something, it doesn't lessen or devalue the difficulties that the people around the provider are also experiencing. Yes, granted, they're very different, but neither one is better or worse than the other. They are experiences, they are difficulties, they are uncertainties and confusions that are valid within the same space, but of course in different ways. And that's where we can really start primarily to assist each other, where the conversation we're having with the provider stops being what are you going to do to provide, and changes to how are we going to try and work this out. In terms of the family and the dependents, the question now ends up having to be, or rather the discussion, the dialogue now has to end up more being, okay, so what can I now do to assist in the situation? I mean, a child now can't necessarily do much, but what we can do is have frank conversations with our children and tell them that, okay, so things are going to be different. This is how they're going to be different. And in them being different, this is how we're going to adjust. A new normal has to be introduced. A new way of living, a new way of expecting, a new way of asking rather, and expecting things has to be introduced. Sometimes what parents tend to do, or individuals in the general sense really, we tend to forget that a straight and honest and earnest conversation needs to be had with the people you live with, because the things that affect you as an individual will automatically affect those around you. And what we all often tend to do as humans, because we are selfish and individualistic by nature, that's a survival instinct. It's normal, it's natural. But what that does and has hurt us as the human race is that we tend to then forget other people in the process of us trying to deal with our own stuff. And what then happens is that you end up looking very selfish. You might not intentionally be trying to do that, but because you close yourself off so much in trying to understand, you forget that other people also play a role. Other people are just as important as affected. And so we tend to not have those conversations, primarily and especially with our children. You need to have a conversation with your child. Age appropriate, of course, but a child from the age of about 5, 6 can have a rational conversation with you. And so it is important that you have a conversation with them in much the same way. It's about honestly respecting their capacity for comprehension. So if you're expecting something to be different, you can't then have the idea that this will just come to pass without a clear direction of what is expected being spoken to. We often say we're not mind readers. None of us are. And so when we are wanting the people around us to support us as the provider, when things have changed in this economy and in this life that we're living right now, how can you then hope that they will be understanding of the difficulty you're going through financially if you don't sit them down and say, okay, so this is now what's going on? A new normal can only be introduced once a conversation about the new normal is had. And that is looking at what was before. I was in a particular job and this allowed us to live a particular type of lifestyle. What happened? Because of this entire situation, I'm not sure what my job is going to look like now, or the finances are not looking exactly the same. What is going to happen now? Now I'm going to be at home for an extended period of time while I'm trying to figure things out. What is expected of you now? What I'm hoping that you can now help me with is it is not necessarily asking for things in the same way that you did, because I can't necessarily provide them in exactly the same way. I'll try my best as much as I can, but it might not be exactly the same. The what, the how, the when, those are questions that have already been answered. And so you've laid out the blueprint of expectation, of desire, of what the world is now going to look like, and putting the ball into the other people's court and all for them to meet you halfway. If they don't, that is a conversation that needs to again be had, so that maybe there were things that were not necessarily understood. But what it will give you surety of is an understanding of how the expectations need to shift and how things are now going to be readdressed really. At a later stage, this can again be renegotiated. I think what we tend to be very fearful of is changing our minds or changing the way in which things were done previously in our current time. And if you're going to be fearful of the developments that take place in your life, you're always going to feel like a failure. But that's just not true. Change is what takes place when indication that your life is moving forward. Sometimes it might feel a little bit like a setback, which it might very well be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a defeat. It is just something that requires you to take a different stance, a different look, a different direction. And whether you choose to take that as things are coming to an end is on you. But you need to remember that making a change, creating a different narrative is progression. It's movement. It might not always be movement that you had hoped for, but it is movement. And that's what the point of this entire COVID thing, I think a lot of us kind of need to start taking into mind, that it is an unexpected occurrence, but there are lessons and understandings that are going to develop from it. The question is, what are you taking from it? But what you need to do in the process is explain what you desire, what you need, and how you hope to achieve what you need. And let the people around you assist you in that. It's as simple as just stating your truth. Job security is a very difficult thing, but it's not something that you have to deal with on your own. Come to me, talk to me, a professional such as myself, and we figure out what the next step is. But it's never ever a place of complete defeat. It's a stumbling block, 100%, but it's not the end. You just need to consider a different way of looking at it. That's all it is.